never believe that a person like this Louise could ever exist. But she does, so here we go. Louise Borton was born in 1996 in a town called Walsall, near Birmingham, England. She lived with her parents and 2 siblings. Although her family was very close-knit, she was always an outsider. She has been described as selfish, cold, manipulative, violent, and it was said that she was both a liar and a thief, all from an early age. Every Sunday when she was a kid, her family and her extended family, like cousins and aunts and all that, would get together at their grandmother's house. And according to her cousin, quote, "To be honest, she was never a normal child. We were always close as a family, but she never wanted to get involved. We always used to meet at my nan's, but she'd just stand there and give you a horrible look. If anyone sat near her, she'd say, 'Go away, or I'll smash your face,' and then she'd just walk out." It was said that she began stealing money and jewelry from her grandmother, and her grandmother started to notice it and would confront Louise. But Louise would become furious with her grandmother when she was confronted, and she said, quote, "If you accuse me of that, I'll never come around again," end quote. Her cousin said, quote, "She was violent. She would try and hurt us without people seeing. When we went to our nan's, she'd never interact with anyone. She just used to stare." When Louise was 11, sadly, her mother walked out on the family because she had found a new boyfriend. And after that, Louise cut off her mother for years. She wanted nothing to do with her whatsoever. Others in the family still stayed connected to the mother, but not Louise. Louise stopped caring about school and often would just skip it altogether, and she would hang out on the street. In her teen years, she began to realize that she could get a lot of attention from boys and men, and she loved it. She learned that she could use sex to get what she wanted, including money and gifts. Like if she saw some shoes she liked, she might hint to a guy about what she might do for those shoes. And next thing you know, he would buy the shoes for her. According to Louise's cousin, as Louise got older, her family began to worry about the type of relationships that she was having with men, and they thought she was showing signs of sex addiction. Quote, "Once she started sleeping with people, she was sleeping with anyone and everyone. Anyone showing her attention, especially if they had money." The fact that her cousin is saying, "especially if they had money," makes me wonder if it's really an addiction. You know, if it's not just the sex that she's after. If they have money, that's better. So, I don't know. When Louise finished school, she figured out a way to make a career out of sex work, but she told everyone she was modeling. She joined a whole bunch of dating apps, like casual dating apps, and she would go on there looking for men to match with, and she would hint to the men that she would do basically So she would offer her modeling services and would promise these men whatever they wanted. Once the photo shoots would begin, on her profile it said, quote, "I'm open to all types of photo shoots, so just ask me and you never know." In 2014, when she was 18, she became pregnant, and she gave birth to a little girl named Lexi. That did not cause her to change any of her ways. She continued on with her career as it was. She slept with as many men as before. She would even bring them around her new baby. She bragged on Facebook about how much money she was making by having sex with men, and her family urged her to change now that she had a child, but she was annoyed with them and she considered them to be trying to meddle in her life. Now the father, his name was Chris Draper, and he reportedly wanted to be involved with Lexi, but Louise made it extremely difficult for him. And he wasn't just like one of her usual men from the apps, I think. He was someone that she was kind of on again, off again with. And I'm not sure why she didn't want him in the life of Lexi, but she didn't. Now her grandmother became extremely ill right after she gave birth to Lexi, and it was known that she wasn't going to live for very long. When she found out that her grandmother only had a few hours left to live, she couldn't be bothered to come by and see her, and she didn't even make it to the funeral. Her cousin said, quote, "When Nan was in hospital, she was the only one who wouldn't come. I contacted Louise and told her they've given Nan less than 24 hours, but she said I can't make it. I rang her the night before the funeral. She said she wasn't coming because she was breastfeeding Lexi. I said I would organize a private area for her, but she said no. The whole family was disgusted. They cut her off after that because she was so selfish," end quote. 2 years later, at age 20, Louise gave birth to another little girl named Scarlet. And Scarlet's father was the same father as Lexi's, Chris Draper. But she gave Scarlet a different last name. Scarlet's last name was Vaughn. I don't know whose name that is or why she chose it. But Lexi's last name was Draper. Now Louise didn't want Chris to be in the life of Scarlet either. So right after she gave birth, she picked herself up and she moved about an hour away to a town called Rugby. She wanted to have some distance between herself and her family and Chris, so everyone could stop meddling, telling her what to do. And in this new town, she continued her life as it was before, going on apps all day long, like it was a job, it sounds like. Spending hours on these apps, trying to hook up with tons and tons of men, online, and then meeting them in person to have sex. It must have took up a good part of the day. And what was she supposed to do with these 2 babies now? How was she going to, go out with these men and have 2 children at home at the same time? Well, she would drop them off with whoever could possibly take them. Friends, neighbors, even her landlady would help out. And if she couldn't find anyone, she would just leave her kids at home one man supposedly said, "Is it okay for us to do this in front of your kids?" And Lexi said, "Yeah, sure, so long as we be quiet." And he was like, "Okay," believe it or not. Sometimes the men would come over and she would go outside, leaving her kids inside, and she would spend some time with the men in their car outside. That was another option. She did whatever she wanted to, basically. And she wasn't overly concerned with her children. One time she supposedly joked, saying that it was okay to leave them alone because she would just give them sleeping tablets. Meaning so they'd be knocked out and couldn't possibly need any care during that time. Whether it was a joke or not, for real, who knows? Now, she also had no patience for her children when she was with them, and people knew this. She would scream at them, curse at them. She would hit them and slap them. She would drag them across the floor by their arm. Now remember, we're still talking about two little kids, a baby and a toddler. So people did report her to social services, but for whatever reason, nobody even investigated at all. Now, on January 2nd, 2018, Louise texted her sister and said she was worried because Lexi was having a, quote, fit out of nowhere. Now, I believe that means a seizure. Maybe that is how they say it in England, I think. Let me know. And her sister said, call an ambulance. But she put it off for a while, and then she decided to call the non-emergency number, which is 111. Like, where in America you call 911 for an emergency, and we don't have a non-emergency number. But in England they call 999 for an emergency and 111 for a non-emergency. So she called 111, and she told the operator that Lexi had stopped breathing for a little bit, and the operator wanted to send an ambulance, but she said no, she doesn't want to do that. She said her father was going to be able to take her in a few hours, and she would just wait. So, a few hours later, she brought Lexi to the hospital, and while Lexi was being examined, she was on her phone texting to men on the apps and sending her pictures to them. The next morning, Lexi was discharged, and they didn't find anything wrong with her. In the early hours of the following day, she called 999, the emergency number, claiming that Lexi had stopped breathing and that she was laying on her back and vomit was coming out of her mouth. So the paramedics came immediately, and when she answered the door, she was just very, regular, nothing was going on. Nothing bad was happening. Just open the door hello, come on in. And they found that Lexi was turning blue and struggling to breathe, and they felt that she had been like this for much longer than what Louise had said. And they were able to save her. They took her to the hospital in the ambulance, and Louise rode in the ambulance and continued to text the men and send them her photos. So, Lexi was treated at the hospital. They decided that maybe she had a chest infection, and they kept her there for 4 days. Louise stayed there with her at the hospital, She was flirting with all the men in the hospital. She was constantly on her phone. It was even said that she went into the bathroom and took topless photos of herself to send to men while she was there in the hospital. So Lexi was discharged with antibiotics for the chest infection. Now at this point, Louise starts telling the men that she speaks to that her daughter is very sick and they should probably, pay her extra in the future because she really needs more money to care for her sickly child. Now she starts looking up a lot of very odd things on the internet, such as, for how long after drowning can someone be resuscitated? How long does it take a dead body to go cold up to the shoulder? She read an article called "Toddler Brought Back to Life After Nearly Drowning." So I don't have to tell you what this is all about. On January 14th, 2018, Louise and her two daughters went over to Louise's sister's house, and they all had a very nice time, and nobody was sick. And then they returned to their home at 6 p.m., and you can see them on CCTV footage going in the door, and everyone looks pretty normal. Now, Louise was 21 at this time, and Lexi was 3. Scarlet was 17 months. Now, early the next morning, so now this is January 15th, Louise called 999 to report that Lexi is not breathing, and the paramedics arrived once again to find Louise just acting like it's another day. Nothing terrible is going on in her house. Hello, come on in. They found Lexi was completely blue. She was cold and her jaw was stiff, and she was sadly pronounced dead. An investigation was done to determine what she died from, and it revealed that rigor mortis had set in by the time paramedics had arrived. She had probably been dead for several hours before Louise had even called. But nonetheless, her death was labeled as an accident, and no further investigation was conducted. So Louise continued her life as normal. She opened up a GoFundMe account to help get money to pay for the funeral, and she sent the link to all the men she knew. Please help me raise money for the funeral. She made a Facebook post which said, "R.I.P. my sleeping angel, we'll never forget you. Mommy loves you, can't believe you've gone," end quote. At this time, Louise's mother, the one who had left the family years ago, she found out about this awful news, and she came back, or she tried to come back into Louise's life at this time to help her. Now, less than 3 weeks later, it was February 1st, 2018, and Louise was now staying in a hotel because her home was too upsetting for her to be in. So she was in a hotel with her daughter, 17-month-old Scarlet, and she called up a man, one of the men who she saw. She asked him for 30 pounds to buy gas for her car so she could take Scarlet to the was at 10:20 p.m. That's 30 minutes after she left the hotel. And she calls 111, the non-emergency number, and says that her daughter is not breathing. So they sent an ambulance to the shopping center. Paramedics were trying to resuscitate Scarlet. Louise told them that she thinks this is from the flu. They rushed her to the hospital where she was sadly pronounced dead. And all the while, Louise was laughing and joking with the hospital staff. So an investigation was done, and now they're taking this more seriously. They found that Scarlet had been suffocated, and Lexi's death was looked into more closely now. And it was determined that both deaths were intentional, not accidental. They had both been suffocated. There were marks on Lexi's nose that indicated her nose had been held shut. There were scratches on her neck from her own fingernails. It's believed that she was trying to pry her mother's hands off of her own neck, and that's how she scratched herself. Scarlet had bruising on her neck, bruises on her head, bleeding to her lungs, damage to her neck muscles, and her blood was found on the pillow at the hotel. I don't know if that means that a pillow was placed over her face, maybe, and that's how the blood got there. I don't know. Now, it took time to gather all this evidence. It didn't happen in a day at all. No, not even close. So they couldn't arrest Louise for quite a while. So she was still out living her life. In June of 2018, she listed a big bag of the girl's clothing on Facebook for £20. And on November 24th, Louise posted on social media, quote, "Mommy's angels taken from me too soon. You will never be forgotten. R.I.P." Finally, in January of 2019, they had gathered enough evidence to arrest and charge her with the murder of Scarlet and Lexi. A mental health assessment was done, and she was found to be legally sane. The trial began in August of 2019 when Louise was 23. She pled not guilty. So at the trial, the prosecution alleged that Lexi had been dead for some time before the 999 call was placed. And they showed Louise's web searches to the jury. The jury was told that it was believed that Scarlet was already dead when Louise brought her out of the hotel room. Even though Louise denied that to be true, the paramedics who responded to the scene said she was, quote, freezing and completely lifeless when he arrived, that she had not just died at that minute or even a few minutes before. She had been dead for a while. And they showed the CCTV footage of her filling up her gas tank when Scarlet was probably already dead, sitting in the car. Louise denied all wrongdoing throughout, stating, quote, "My children were never an inconvenience to me, and I accommodated my lifestyle and personal life around them. I still don't know how my daughters died or what caused it." So she was found guilty. With Lexi, you tried to pass her death off as an unexpected natural death. You pretended you were driving to the hospital. The truth is, both children died because you deliberately obstructed their airways. Text messages and internet searches done on your mobile phone reveal a degree of premeditation. I am sure you were responsible for the events that led to Lexi's admission to hospital. Your internet searching was sinister. You delayed calling for an ambulance until you were sure she was dead. The murder of any child by a mother involves the process of abuse of trust. They ought to have relied on their mother to look after them. It is not a case of a young mother doing something in the heat of the moment. The evidence shows calculated decisions. In between the deaths, you carried on as normal." End quote. She was jailed for life. The minimum term will be 32 years, and she will be eligible for parole in January of 2051, and she'll be in her 50s at that time. Chris Draper, the father of Lexi and Scarlet, said that he and his family were totally heartbroken at the deaths of both children. He said, quote, "When we lost Lexi, we were heartbroken and couldn't believe she had gone. Then we were devastated to hear about Scarlet. Only having a short time with Lexi and never meeting Scarlet makes it all the more heartbreaking. The only comfort is that Lexi and Scarlet are together." End quote. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. First of all, rest in peace to Scarlet and Lexi. Their lives were cut way too short by a person who was supposed to love and protect them. And we're left with the obvious question of why? Why did this need to happen? Such a senseless crime. If Louise didn't want her children or couldn't handle her children, why didn't she give them to somebody else? Anyone else would have been better than doing what she did. There was plenty of family. I know there are people who, after the fact, said they would have taken the kids. That doesn't mean that at the time they were giving that message. So, I'm not going to say that everyone was walking around saying, "I'll take the kids off your hands." And even the father, Chris, was saying he would have taken the kids. Even if none of that was true, it still doesn't mean that she needed to take their lives. There are adoption agencies, and the thing is, I don't know how it works in England, but I can say that in the US, two little babies like this would not have trouble finding a home. They were very young, and lots of people would be more than thrilled to have them as their own. Many people would be willing to take both of them even. So it's not as if they would probably have even had to go to foster care. So why couldn't she have just given them up? Well, I'm thinking she wanted them out of her life forever. She didn't even want them to exist anymore and have to think about them. And she didn't want to be seen as a person who had given up her children. She thought thought that she could get away with this. No one would ever know what she had done. And then people would actually feel bad for her. That would have been a good thing. She's that poor young mother who lost both of her children so tragically to illness. And she could have used that to get more money from men. I'm thinking that that is what was on her mind. That's why she didn't want to hand the kids over to somebody else. Plus, to her, she really didn't think much about the value of human life. She clearly had zero empathy whatsoever. I'm thinking that if she had never been charged for these murders, that she almost definitely would have gone on to have another child and would probably wind up doing the same thing to that child. That's just my thinking. But luckily, that's not going to happen. So the question of whether or not she had a sex addiction or if she just enjoyed the attention and the money that she got from the men, I would have to say she didn't really truly have a sex addiction. In my mind, she just loved all the positive attention she was getting, and the money made it so that she could support herself in this way. Now, we might be asking, why was she the way she was from the start? You know, why was she this cold, evil, manipulative little girl? We really don't know that much about her home life when she was a child. We do know that her mother left the family to be with another man, which is not a good sign. Not a sign that things were going that well at home. And her mother was clearly dealing with some demons, as the niece suggested, so I'm guessing her family life was less than ideal. But regardless, that gives her no right or excuse to have done what she did. Now, as I was researching this case, I happened to see a reel on Instagram, and it was of like some kind of gorilla, I think, with like a blue face, a very exotic one from China, and it was sitting with its little baby, and it was peeling a banana for the baby. It took the banana in its mouth and it pulled off part of the peel and then gave it to the baby to eat, to make it easier for the baby. And since I was heavily researching this case, it came to my mind right away that this gorilla knows what she has to do to take care of her child. She has these instincts that nobody had to tell her, do this, do that. She just knows, I take care of my baby, I feed my baby, and I protect him or her from danger, and I love my baby. You know, that is the animal kingdom as well as humans. We are all born with those instincts, but not Louise. Why is that? Why does she not have that natural instinct to care for her child? Not only does she not have an instinct to care for her child, she had no problems with killing 2 of her children. So, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I will leave it for us all